In this tutorial, we'll learn how to use the Lexical Richness plugin for the Butter text analysis software. What this plugin will do is calculate a number of scores that pertain to the vocabulary of each text that we're analyzing. You may be most familiar with the type-token ratio metric, which is the number of unique words divided by the total number of words in each text. Now, there are a bunch of other types of lexical richness scores that we can measure, and this plugin generates a lot of different ones that are conceptually related for the most part. Type token ratio and other lexical richness scores are most often used in research on second language acquisition, for example. So for people who are native English speakers who are learning Dutch, we would expect to see their type token ratio and other lexical richness scores increase as they become more proficient in the language. We also sometimes use these types of metrics in more cognitive research, so research on things like Alzheimer's, to look for cognitive decline. Now you can see that this plugin takes tokens as its input type. Now, these types of algorithms are generally fairly language agnostic, but we have to be able to tokenize those texts first to measure which ones are unique versus which ones are more repetitious. Within Butter, for most Western languages, the Twitter-aware tokenizer will work just fine. If you're working with a language that has a more continuous script, so something like traditional Chinese or Javanese, for example, you would want to tokenize them using an appropriate system first. Now for this example, we'll just be analyzing a bunch of TED Talk transcripts, and these are just English language transcripts that I've collected over the years, nothing too special there. So let's go ahead and just jump right in. First, we want to tell the software where our texts are. Then we need to tokenize. And now, depending on your research questions and what's normal in the field that you're working in, you may want to put a couple of intermediate steps here as well. So sometimes when people are calculating these measures of lexical richness, they would want to lemmatize their text first, so they would simplify the forms of each words so that they gain more of a, clean measure of the vocabulary that people are using. So we're ignoring different inflections of a word and treating them all as the same. You may also want to remove things like punctuation using a stop list. So we could also insert the remove stop words plugin here and drop out all of the punctuation, or maybe even punctuation plus some common function words and so on. Now for this example, I'm just going to do plain old lexical richness calculations. It's going to include punctuation, different forms of each word, and so on. Now if we go to the settings for this plugin, you can see a couple of options here. These options pertain to particular measures of lexical richness. So matter, moving average type token ratio scores, are based on a moving word window that scrolls through our text, and we calculate certain lexical richness metrics in that word window. Same for MTLD. I won't go into the specifics here of what these are, but you can look at the relevant publications and figure out whether or not you need to update these values based on the nature of your texts and your research questions. Now let's go ahead and save our output. I'm going to save this as a file. We'll just name this LexRich. And we'll let this run for a few seconds here just to generate some output. Then I'll go ahead and cancel it and we'll look and see what we got. Now the output for this plugin is pretty straightforward. In the far left column we have the different texts that we analyzed, the identifiers for those. We have the number of tokens and the number of types. So these are all of the these are the total number of tokens. So this includes words, punctuation, everything. The number of types is the number of unique tokens. So if we divide the types by tokens, we'll actually get the type token ratio. So 4 divided by 6 is 0.6 repeating. The rest of the columns are these different measures of lexical richness that we can calculate, things like evenness, MTLD, and so on. Now, I'm not going to go into any detail about what each of these metrics calculate. A lot of them are variations on type token ratio. They're supposed to handle different types of skew and so forth. But there are a number of publications, mostly from linguistics and computational linguistics, that really go into detail about each of these different measures of lexical richness, and there are even a few really good papers that compare and contrast them for different purposes. And that's it. That's how we use the lexical richness plugin for Butter.